The 9,847 meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is date of election to fill a vacancy in the International Court of Justice. The agenda is adopted. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. Members of the Council have before them document S/2025/48, the text of a draft resolution prepared in the course of the Council's prior consultations. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2025/37, containing the note by the Secretary General concerning the date of an election to fill a vacancy in the International Court of Justice. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution before it. I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2025/48 please raise their hand. The result of the voting is as follows. The draft resolution received 15 votes in favor. The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as Resolution 2770/2025. The meeting is adjourned. The 9,841st meeting of the Security Council is resumed. I wish to remind all speakers to limit their statement to no more than 3 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out its work expeditiously. The flashing light on the microphone will prompt speakers to bring their remarks to a close after 3 minutes. I now give the floor to the representative of Malaysia. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, thank you for convening this meeting. Malaysia takes this opportunity to congratulate and welcome the new non-permanent members of the Council. We align ourselves with the statements of NAM and OIC. Mr. President, a new year has begun, and praise be to God on a promising note. We welcome the deal on a ceasefire in Gaza. We hope this will end the catastrophic suffering endured by the Palestinian people for over 15 months. During that period, the world had witnessed sheer barbarity and utter contempt of international law. It saw wanton killing of civilians, mostly women and children, and widespread destruction of civilian infrastructures. It witnessed this Council's ineptitude in upholding international peace and security. It is, however, concerning that just as the world sees a glimmer of hope in Gaza, Israel's occupation forces escalate their violent operations in the West Bank, and illegal settlers intensify the expansion of their illegal settlements, destroying Palestinian homes and properties. These provocative acts have the potential of undermining the fragile ceasefire in Gaza. This Council has a responsibility to ensure that the ceasefire in Gaza holds. It must ensure that those who either renege on it or actively seek to unravel it are held to account. Mr. President, the laws adopted by the Israeli Knesset against UNRWA, which will enter into force in the coming days, will impede multilateral efforts to protect Palestinians and also jeopardize the ceasefire in Gaza. Malaysia condemns these laws, which seek to dismantle UNRWA. We are also appalled by Israel's continued refusal to cooperate with the agency and the United Nations. It is abundantly clear that Israel wants to unravel UNRWA and expel it from Palestinian territory so that it can complete its insidious plan of ethnic cleansing and full annexation. The indispensable and irreplaceable role of UNRWA has been reaffirmed countless times by various parties. Israel must rescind these laws and cease its attacks against the agency and the United Nations. 78 years since the adoption of General Assembly Resolution 1812, the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state remains unfulfilled. This Council must compel Israel to reverse all actions that undermine the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the creation of a sovereign Palestinian state. The occupation has lasted for far too long. The International Court of Justice has made clear Israel's obligation to end its occupation of the Palestinian territory as rapidly as possible. We hope that the high-level international conference for the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution, scheduled for June this year, will chart a clear and irreversible path towards the long-overdue establishment of a sovereign state of Palestine. Mr. President, as the UN commemorates its 80th anniversary this year, we are at the most opportune moment to resolving the Palestinian question. We call on all parties to muster the political will to ensure that international law is upheld and support the inalienable right to self-determination of the Palestinian people in order for peace to prevail for Palestine, for Israel, and for the region. Thank you.
Thank the representative of Malaysia for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of India.
Mr. President and Excellencies, this is the first quarterly open debate on the subject in 2025. We are happy that this new year has ushered in hope and a potential pathway to peace and stability as we witness some green shoots in the region. We welcome the announcement of the agreement for the release of hostages and a ceasefire in Gaza, and it is our hope that this will lead to safe, sustained supply of humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza. We take positive note of the initial measures taken by the concerned parties towards the implementation of these understandings. You are all aware of our position. We have consistently called for a ceasefire, accelerated and unimpeded provision of humanitarian assistance, release of all hostages, and return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy. Unfortunately, during the 16 months of conflict, we witnessed devastation, the loss of civilian lives and infrastructure. It is our hope that the implementation of the current agreement will alleviate the suffering of the hostages, their families, and the people of Gaza. India has been categorical and consistent in its position. Conflict does not offer any solutions. The need for release of hostages, continued flow of humanitarian assistance, and a ceasefire is more dire than ever. It is our hope that the parties concerned would seize the opportunity offered by the ceasefire and resort to dialogue and diplomacy for a sustainable and durable solution to the current conflict. There should be an end to the human suffering of our fellow brothers and sisters. Humanitarian assistance should flow without any hindrances. India has also unequivocally condemned the terror attacks on 7th October 2023. We believe that terrorism and hostage-taking have no justification, even as we have called for respect for international humanitarian law. Mr. President, India has demonstrated its unwavering support to the friendly Palestinian people over decades. Such support has taken several forms. India's endeavor to make a tangible and lasting impact on their daily lives has been at its very core. Our continued support to UNRWA bears testimony to our commitment. In this context, we underline that UNRWA has an important role in providing much required relief to the people of Gaza. We also reiterate our concerns about the recent restrictions that have been imposed on its operations. At this juncture, I would like to emphasize that India was among the first countries to recognize the state of Palestine in 1988. We remain committed to a two-state solution which entails establishment of a sovereign, viable, and independent state of Palestine within recognized and mutually agreed borders, living side by side with Israel in peace. Mr. President, India remains hopeful that peace and calm would be restored in the Middle East at the earliest. India will remain engaged with all parties concerned in a proactive manner in achieving the vision of a peaceful and stable Middle East. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of India for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Cameroon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of Member States of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in my capacity as the chair of the OIC Group. Mr. President, the OIC Group welcomes the announcement in Doha on 15 January that the parties to the conflict in Gaza Strip have reached a ceasefire agreement. We express our deep appreciation for the effort by the State of Qatar, the Arab Republic of Egypt, and the United States that have led to the agreement. The OIC Group, alongside the overwhelming majority of the international community, has long been calling for an immediate ceasefire and an end to the Israel military onslaught against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, which has caused a horrifying casualty toll and massive destruction and unbearable human suffering. This call for an immediate, permanent, and unconditional ceasefire was demanded most recently inter alia in General Assembly Resolution S-1026, following the regrettable use of veto once again in the Security Council. While we welcome this important progress leading to the agreement announced by the Prime Minister of Qatar on 15 January, it is imperative to ensure a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire, the complete withdrawal of Israel occupying force from the Gaza Strip, and the immediate provision of adequate, sustained, and safe humanitarian and all full-scale all over Gaza Strip for all Palestinians in need to address the catastrophic humanitarian situation, including conditions of famine, desertion, and spread of disease, the mass devastation of the healthcare system, and the mass displacement inflicted by Israel, the occupying power, on the population on the population. In this context, we commend the outcome of the Cairo Ministerial Conference to enhance the humanitarian response in Gaza that was convened on 2 December 2024. We call for full respect of international law, including humanitarian and human rights law, and in this regard, recall also the urgent need for the respect of the provisional measure orders of the International Court of Justice. We also appreciate the effort of the international community led by Saudi Arabia, which includes Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, Turkey, Indonesia, Nigeria, Secretary General of the League of Arab States, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to discuss the situation in Gaza and to move immediately and urgently to stop the ongoing violation by the Israel occupying of international humanitarian law in a way that ensures full protection for civilians in the Gaza Strip. Similarly, the OIC Group welcomes the launch of the International Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on behalf of Arab and Islamic countries and European partners to revitalize the peace process and call on the rest of the countries to join the alliance. In this context, the OIC Group calls on the Security Council to form an independent and credible international investigation committee to investigate crimes committed by the Israel occupying army in the Gaza Strip in the context of the crime of genocide, including mass graves, the crime of torture, field execution, forced disappearance, looting and ethnic cleansing, and to take serious steps to prevent the obliteration of evidence and proof, to hold the perpetrators accountable and ensure that they do not escape punishment. The OIC Group also affirms in this regard its full support for the Palestinian government in implementing its relief, economic recovery, reform, and reconstruction program. The principle of territorial integrity in one state, one government, one law, and one system in the Palestinian territory is of utmost importance to ensure a unified and effective approach to the post-war reconstruction and recovery of Gaza Strip, which require years of concerted national and international action. We remain deeply concerned over the ongoing Israeli settlement expansion and the escalation of violence and terrorism perpetrated by settlers against the Palestinian civilian population in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. These actions, coupled with attempts to alter the historical and legal status quo of holy sites, particularly Al-Aqsa Mosque, pose a direct threat to peace and stability in the region. We urge the Security Council to take decisive measures to halt these violations and hold Israel accountable for its actions, which are in blatant contravention of international law and relevant UN resolution and in the ICJ advisory opinion of 19 July 2024. We further call on the Security Council to ensure the full implementation of all its resolutions, including Resolution 2220, 2720, 2735, and Resolution 2334, which unequivocally condemns Israel's settlement activities, demand they be halted, and reaffirm the two-state solution in accordance with the relevant UN resolution. We also urge this august body to uphold its responsibilities on the UN General Assembly Resolution ES 1024 on the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, deeming the Israel occupation illegal and demanding it be brought to an end. The international community should not remain silent in the face of Israel's illegal acts violating the rights of the Palestinian people, including to self-determination and return, and on determining the two-state solution. The illegal legislation adopted recently by Israel, the occupying power, against the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for the Palestinian refugee is a matter of grave concern. These laws threaten to obstruct the agency operations in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, and prevent it from providing essential humanitarian services to Palestinian refugees, particularly in Gaza Strip. We call on the Security Council to ensure Israel compliance with its obligation under international law, the UN Charter, and relevant UN resolution. The international community must protect the mandate of UNRWA, pending the achievement of a just solution for the plight of the refugee, and must ensure that the necessary and predictable financial resources to its budget, and enable the agency to provide the basic services to Palestinian refugees in Gaza Strip, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and in all its areas of operation without impediment of restriction. The OIC underscored the UNRWA remains an indispensable lifeline for the Palestinian refugee, and that it remains the backbone of UN humanitarian operation in the occupied Palestinian territory, and is vital for the effective implementation of the ceasefire agreement and for the immense recovery efforts. The group condemns Israel's repeated attacks and intrusion into Syrian territory, which constitute a grave violation of international law and relevant UN resolution. We affirm the need to support stability, security, territorial integrity, accountability, humanitarian aid, dialogue among political Syrian actors, and a peaceful transition of power in Syria. Such action by Israel only exacerbate regional tension and undermine effort to achieve security and stability in Syria. The OIC group welcomes the election of General Joseph Aoun as President of the Republic of Lebanon and the nomination of George Nawal Salam to form a new government in Lebanon, and calls on the international community to extend all support to Lebanon to help in the reconstruction effort caused by the year-long Israel aggression that left widespread destruction. The OIC group welcomes also the cessation of hostilities arrangement that came into effect 27 November 2024, bringing an end to the Israel aggression against Lebanon, and calls for its implementation within the 60 days time frame. In this regard, the group calls on Israel to withdraw from all Lebanese occupied territories and call for the full implementation of Resolution 1701, 2006, in the manner that ensures sustainable stability along the border. It also called for the respect of Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity without an internationally recognized border. The Palestinian people have waited for far too long for their inalienable rights to freedom, dignity, self-determination, and the realization of the independence of the state of Palestine on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. This time for decisive action is more urgent to take. The international community, particularly the Security Council, must rise to its responsibility and take concrete steps to end the illegal Israel occupation, uphold international law without exception, and grant the State of Palestine full membership at the United Nations, which is considered a prerequisite for a just and lasting solution and a test to the credibility of the international system and the international legal order. In conclusion, Mr. President, the OIC Group calls on the Security Council to act with urgency and determination to address the ongoing injustice faced by the Palestinian people. This august body must uphold its responsibility to maintain international peace and security by ensuring the implementation of its resolution and holding Israel, the occupying power, accountable for the violation, thus upholding its charter duties and restoring credibility and trust in its august institution. Finally, Mr. President, I personally thank you and congratulate you for the month well done, full with success. Thank you.
Not yet. I want to thank the representative of Cameroon for the statement. And I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ahmed Faisal Mohammed, Vice Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Right of the Palestinian People.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished Council members, I extend congratulations to Algeria on its presidency of the Security Council and thank His Excellency Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf for presiding over this meeting. I also welcome Denmark, Greece, Pakistan, Panama, and Somalia to the Council and express appreciation to the Secretary General for his tireless efforts for peace, justice, and a just resolution to the question of Palestine. Distinguished members, the committee welcomes the hope that 2025 has brought, including the ceasefire arrangement in Gaza between Israel and Hamas on 15 January. We commend Egypt, Qatar, and the United States for their critical role in achieving this agreement, which outlines a phased implementation. This includes what we have all been demanding: the release of hostages, the planned release of Palestinian prisoners, and the entry of much-needed humanitarian aid into Gaza. While we applaud the ceasefire, it is disheartening that Israeli airstrikes continued even after its announcement, causing additional casualties and undermining the agreement. In just 24 hours after the ceasefire deal was reached, 80 Palestinians, including women and children, were killed. Gaza's death toll now exceeds 47,000, with over 110,000 injured, many permanently, and over 2.1 million people displaced, often repeatedly. Humanitarian aid remains blocked, worsening starvation, disease, and suffering. We call on Israel to end its attacks, displacement, and violations of international law. The Security Council's division and failure to implement Resolution 2735 are costly and must end. Our inaction undermines our credibility and moral standing. Distinguished members, the world and this Council has grown desensitized to the horrors in Gaza. In the absence of action from the Council, we commend that the General Assembly and Member States have stepped up, demanding a ceasefire, protecting civilians, and pursuing justice. The committee has amplified these efforts, featuring testimonies from Palestinians, civil society, and experts on the dire realities in Gaza. Committee events such as the 2024 International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, and the exhibits like Gaza, Palestine, A Crisis of Humanity and Cry for Justice at UN headquarters remind us of the human cost of this conflict. The ceasefire must be a stepping stone to lasting peace. Israel's actions in Gaza pose a threat to international peace and security and are persistent violations of humanitarian and human rights law. We urge the Security Council to ensure that the ceasefire holds, prevent further atrocities, and set a path toward recovery and peace. We call on the Council to play its part in advancing a political horizon for the question of Palestine, based on the two-state solution and UN resolutions. We commend the General Assembly's adoption of Resolution ES 10/24, demanding Israel's withdrawal from occupied Palestinian territory within a year, and urging member states to cease importing settlement products and supplying arms used in the OPT. Accountability for war crimes and crimes against humanity is critical, and we stress the need for enforcement at national and international levels. Following Resolution ES 10/25, reaffirming support for UNRWA's mandate, the General Assembly has requested an ICJ advisory opinion on Israel's obligations regarding the presence of UN entities in the OPT. We are confident the ICJ will reaffirm the vital role of UNRWA and other UN bodies. The Security Council must also support these mandates and reject efforts to undermine UNRWA's critical work. Denying Palestinian rights is a death sentence for the people of Gaza. Distinguished members, immediate and unhindered humanitarian access is essential. UNRWA's role is indispensable in delivering aid and crucial life-saving services at the scale required. The ceasefire offers an opportunity to rebuild and heal, but only if the international community provides unwavering support. The committee will continue to engage member states, regional organizations, parliamentarians, civil society, and UN bodies to advocate for Palestinian rights and ensure adherence to the ceasefire agreement and the achievement of just and lasting peace. We urge all member states to support the Palestinian government in leading the recovery process in Gaza. The people urgently need food, shelter, water, healthcare, and a pathway to healing and hope. This is a collective responsibility. Our efforts continue to be driven by the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and freedom in an independent state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living in peace with its neighbors. A just resolution for Palestinians remains vital, in line with international law and long-standing UN resolutions that demand implementation. Let us unite in this noble cause for justice, peace, and human dignity. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Ahmed Faisal for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Iceland.
Thank you, President, for convening this important meeting. We wholeheartedly welcome the long-awaited ceasefire in Gaza and are grateful to Egypt, Qatar, and the US for their painstaking efforts. Now, another difficult chapter begins, the full implementation of this ceasefire agreement. Iceland calls on all parties to uphold their commitments and on the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility in this regard. Respect for international law, including international humanitarian law, must be maintained, and where it is not, there must be accountability. Mr. President, Iceland has repeatedly called for the freedom of all the hostages and welcomes the releases over last weekend. We urge the release of all the remaining hostages rapidly in compliance with Phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement. Their appalling ordeal must be brought to an end. Iceland has also repeatedly called for immediate and unhindered humanitarian access in line with international humanitarian law. Reports of rapid rollout of aid to Gaza are very welcome. Gaza has been left in ruins, though. Most homes and businesses are destroyed, livelihoods lost, schools have been turned into emergency shelters, and hospitals flattened. Reconstruction will be a mammoth task. We, the international community, have failed the people of Gaza for over a year, especially the children of Gaza. Those who have survived are losing their second school year in a row. We must not fail them again. Under these circumstances, a total halt to the operations of UNRWA, the most centrally placed humanitarian organization responding to the needs of Palestinian refugees in the Middle East, would have devastating consequences. Israel must allow UNRWA to operate in the humanitarian phase and secure its involvement in the transitional process. Israel's new law against UNRWA could further destabilize the situation in these areas and in Israel and in the region as a whole, and fundamentally jeopardize the prospects for a two-state solution. Mr. President, a ceasefire, by definition, is a temporary situation, not a solution. The people of Palestine and Israel deserve to live in peace and security in prosperous and democratic societies. They deserve to live without fear of aggression or terrorist attacks. We call on all parties to break out of the ongoing cycle of violence and work towards the only internationally recognized, long-term, sustainable solution available, a two-state solution based on international law, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security and mutual recognition. Thank you.
The representative of Iceland for his statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Señor Presidente,
Mr.
la República
President,
Bolivariana de Venezuela
Bolivarian
tiene
Republic
el honor
of
de hacer
Venezuela
uso de
has
la
the
palabra
honor
en nombre
of
del
taking the
grupo de
floor
amigos
on
en
behalf
defensa
of the
de
group
la
of
Carta
friends
de
in
las
defense
Naciones
of the Charter of the United
Señor
Nations.
Presidente,
Mr. President,
la falta de resolución de la
the
cuestión de
lack
Palestina
of a solution to the
encuentra
question
en el
of
centro de la
Palestine is
situación
at the
en el
core of
Medio
the situation in the Middle
a lo cual
East,
se suma el imperante ciclo de
coupled with the
impunidad
prevailing
que no ha
cycle
hecho
of
sino
impunity that has
envalentonar a la
only
potencia
emboldened the
ocupante
occupying
para seguir
power
desafiando este
to
órgano,
continue to
demostrando
show
su desprecio
contempt
por el derecho
for this
internacional.
body and international law.
Lamentablemente, el genocidio
Regrettably,
en curso en la franja
the
de
ongoing
Gaza
genocide in the
ha
Gaza
cobrado la
Strip,
vida de
which
más de
has claimed the lives of over
46,600
46,600 innocent civilians, including women and
una cifra
children,
que muy
a figure
probablemente
that
sea incluso superior en un 40%,
may likely be
según un
40%
estudio publicado
higher
recientemente,
than reported
y
according
más de
to a study
110,000
recently
heridos,
published, and over
la inmensa
110,000
mayoría
wounded,
también civiles.
the overwhelming
No ha
majority
sido
also
suficiente
civilians,
para
has not been
persuadir a
enough
quienes todavía
to
hoy
persuade
siguen proporcionando a
those that
Israel
still today
los
continue
medios
to provide
necesarios
Israel
para continuar
with
con
the
sus
means to
políticas y
continue with its
criminales
criminal
en el
policies and
territorio
practices
palestino ocupado,
in the
incluidas
occupied
sus
Palestinian
orientales.
territory, including East Jerusalem.
Exigimos al gobierno de
We
los Estados
demand the
Unidos de
government
América,
of the United States of
miembro
America,
permanente
permanent
del
member
Consejo
of the
de
Security
Seguridad,
Council,
que ponga a un
to
lado
put
sus
aside
cálculos
its political
políticos,
calculations,
teniendo en cuenta que ha sido
for it has
justamente
been
esto lo que ha
this
mantenido
that
a
has
este órgano
kept
rehén de una
that
parálisis
this
que,
body
entre otras
hostage
cosas,
to a
ha
paralysis
envalentonado a
that, among
Israel para
other
continuar con
things,
sus
has
políticas de
emboldened Israel
apartheid
to
y
continue with its
exterminio
policies
contra
of
el pueblo
apartheid
palestino.
and extermination against the
Señor
Palestinian
Presidente,
people.
estamos
Mr.
conscientes del
President,
acuerdo de cese
we are
al fuego
certainly
alcanzado
mindful of the
recientemente
recent ceasefire
y
agreement
esperamos
reached
que
by
su
the
plena
parties,
implementación
and
por
we
ambas
hope
partes
that its
sea
full
importante,
implementation by
un paso
both
importante y
parties will be an
práctico hacia la
important practical
estabilización
step
a
toward
largo
the
plazo de la
long-term
situación en el
stabilization of the
territorio palestino
situation
ocupado,
in occupied
incluyendo
Palestinian
en la Ribera
territory, including
Occidental,
in the West Bank,
Jerusalén del Este y en la
East
Franja de Gaza,
Jerusalem, and the Gaza
y que
Strip,
esto
and
permita
that
crear
this
las
will
condiciones
also create the
necesarias
necessary
para
conditions
garantizar el acceso
for allowing
humanitario
unimpeded
filtrado de
humanitarian
forma
access
coherente, segura y a
consistently,
escala
safely,
a
and to
quienes
scale
desesperadamente
to
lo
those that
necesitan,
are in desperate need,
así como
as
para
well
mejorar la
as
situación en la
for
región del
both
Medio
improving
Oriente
the
como un
situation
todo
in the Middle East
y a
as a
resolver de
region
manera
as a
justa
whole,
y de
and
una vez
justly
por todas la
resolving
cuestión
once
de
and for all
Palestina.
the question of Palestine.
Sin embargo,
However,
esto no exime a este
that
órgano de
does
sus
not absolve this
responsabilidades.
body of its
De allí que
responsibilities, and we
reiteramos que
reiterate
este Consejo
that
de
this
Seguridad
Security
debe
Council
asumir sus
must shoulder its
responsabilidades,
responsibilities,
incluso sobre la base
including
de las
on the basis
disposiciones
of the relevant
pertinentes del capítulo
provisions
séptimo
of
de
Chapter
la Carta
7
de las
of the
Naciones
Charter
Unidas
of the United
y que
Nations,
debe también velar
and
porque
must
sus
also
resoluciones sobre la
ensure that
cuestión
its
de Palestina sean
resolutions on the question
respetadas
of
e
Palestine are both
implementadas
fully
plenamente.
respected and implemented.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President, We avail ourselves of this opportunity to emphasize the indispensable role of UNRWA for ensuring basic services to the Palestinian refugees in the catastrophic situation in Gaza. And in this regard, we reaffirm the need to ensure the necessary political and financial support to enable UNRWA to carry out its vital operations as the backbone of the international humanitarian effort in Gaza and in accordance with its mandate in the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, and in the other areas of operation in the region. Serious efforts must be urgently made to bring a halt to Israel's measures aimed at dismantling UNRWA and preventing its life-saving assistance. Similarly, we would like to also emphasize the urgent need of redoubling international efforts to effectively and immediately advance in a much-needed process of accountability for all the war crimes committed by Israel, the occupying power, against the peoples of Palestine, Lebanon, and other nations, in which all relevant mechanisms of international justice are expected to play a responsible role in order to put an end to the prevailing cycle of impunity, which has only emboldened Israel, the occupying power, to perpetuate over time its criminal policies and practices against the peoples of the region, most gravely against the Palestinian people for over 76 years since the onset of the Nakba. In this regard, we reiterate our call on the international community to take effective and concrete actions to compel Israel, the occupying power, to adhere to international law, including through the continued denunciation of the prevailing double standards and selectivity in the application of the Charter of the UN and international law, including international humanitarian law, and by warning that these double standards seriously undermine the credibility of states that insist on protecting the illegal and criminal actions of Israel and the legitimacy of multilateral institutions. In this context, we also call on the responsible members of the international community to take urgent actions and adopt in a decisive manner all necessary measures aimed at preventing the systematic attempts aimed at undermining, including by force and through resorting to illegal settlers, the viability of the state of Palestine, particularly in light of the increasing threats by Israel to annex the occupied West Bank. We recall in this context the conclusion of the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion of 19 July 2024, which we have welcomed, and that notes that, and I quote, the sustained abuse by Israel of its position as an occupying power through annexation and assertion of permanent control over the occupied Palestinian territory and continued frustration of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination violates fundamental principles of international law and renders Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territory unlawful. End of quote. Mr. President, we also reiterate that establishing a just and comprehensive peace in the Middle East as a whole requires Israel's withdrawal from all occupied Arab territories, including the occupied Syrian Arab Golan, and from Lebanon, as well as implementing the relevant United Nations resolutions, most notably Resolutions 242, 338, and 497 of the Security Council, which reaffirmed that the acquisition of territory by force is inadmissible in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and the principles of international law, and that the Israeli decision to impose its laws, jurisdiction, and administration in the occupied Syrian Golan is null, void, and has no international legal effect. Moreover, we seize this opportunity to reiterate our serious concern at the continued attempts of Israel, the occupying power, to ignite and explode the Middle East region, as demonstrated, among other things, by its repeated gross violations of international law, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law, coupled with this deliberate escalation of violence and continued provocations and violations against against the sovereignty, territorial integrity, stability, and security of countries in the region. We call once again on those who may have any influence to demand Israel, the occupying power, to exert restraint and desist from its aggressive policies and plans to expand the conflict and generate a spillover effect, mindful of the potential devastating consequences for the well-being of entire peoples and the peace, stability, and security of the Middle East region and beyond. Now, we welcome nonetheless the cessation of hostilities arrangement between Israel and Lebanon of the 26th of November of 2024 and call for its full implementation by both parties, with the support of the United Nations Special Coordinator for Lebanon and the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, in line with their respective mandates, as well as Resolution 1701. However, we ought to express our concerns about the numerous violations of ceasefire by Israel and call for all violations of the arrangement to stop, while recalling that peacekeepers must never be the target of an attack. We also recall that, according to this arrangement, Israel should withdraw its forces in a phased manner south of the Blue Line by the 26th of January, in parallel to the deployment of Lebanese armed forces. We reaffirm in this context our strong support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence of Lebanon, and we urge Israel to respect the agreed timeline and cease its occupation of Lebanese territories without delay. Mr. President, we conclude by stressing the need to work together decisively to ensure that we can finally put an end to the illegal Israeli occupation, that we can finally admit the State of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations, that we can finally achieve the independence of the State of Palestine with East Jerusalem, Al-Quds, Al-Sharif as its capital, that we can finally realize the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including to self-determination and freedom, and that we can finally achieve a just, comprehensive, and lasting solution to the question of Palestine in all its aspects, including for the plight of Palestinian refugees and the realization of their right to return in accordance with international law, the relevant UN resolutions, and the Charter of the United Nations on the basis of the two-state solution. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And I now give the floor to the representative of Thailand.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to first of all congratulate Nigeria for assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month and for convening this very important debate. Allow me to congratulate also Ecuador, Japan, Malta, Mozambique, and Switzerland for your contributions to the Council this past 2 years, and to Denmark, Greece, Pakistan, Panama, Somalia, for your successful elections to the Council. President, it has been more than 15 months that civilians in Gaza have suffered violence and hostilities, hunger and famine, and the collapse of our supporting system. More than 46,000 lives are lost. Most are women and children. More than 110,000 have been injured. And more than 1.9 million people have been displaced. Therefore, Thailand welcomes the ceasefire agreement in Gaza, which took effect on January 19 of this year. We thank the tireless efforts under the mediation of Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. Thailand sincerely hopes that all parties concerned will adhere to the implementation of this agreement. We also hope that this will pave the way for a permanent ceasefire and sustainable peace and stability in the region. Under this ceasefire agreement, we urge all parties to urgently facilitate the swift delivery of critical humanitarian assistance to the people in Gaza without any impediments. Humanitarian assistance and protection of civilians must be prioritized at all times. And we hope that all remaining hostages and captives will be immediately released, including Thai nationals who are not involved whatsoever in the conflict and regrettably are still unaccounted for. President, UNRWA remains the backbone of all humanitarian assistance in Gaza. And Thailand reiterates, as in Resolution ES10/25 of December 11 of 2024, that, and I quote, "No organization can replace or substitute the agency's capacity and mandate to serve Palestinian refugees and civilians in urgent need of life-saving humanitarian assistance," and end quote. Any interruption or suspension of UNRWA's work will pose serious humanitarian and security risk for lives of Palestinians in the region. Thailand wishes to reaffirm our support for genuine and constructive dialogues between Israel and Palestine with a view to finding a mutually agreed peaceful solution in line with the two-state solution, whereby the states of Israel and Palestine live side by side in peace and security in accordance with international law and the relevant UN resolutions. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Thailand for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Chile.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We're grateful for the convening of this first quarterly debate of the Security Council on the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. Mr. President, Chile welcomes the agreement signed last Wednesday between Israel and Hamas that establishes a ceasefire in Gaza after 15 months of a devastating war. Since the savage attack perpetrated by Hamas on the 7th of October of 2023, to which an indiscriminate response by Israel followed against the civilian population of the Gaza Strip, our country has insisted on the need to put an end to this conflict and demanded the release of all hostages. This war has left an absolutely devastating picture. We concluded 2024 lamenting the death of thousands of civilians, hundreds of UN workers, and over 100,000 wounded, mostly women and children. Over 70% of critical infrastructure was destroyed. Thousands of Palestinians lost their homes and were displaced. We want to express our solidarity with all the families that lost their loved ones in this conflict. As far as the healthcare infrastructure, as mentioned in the last report of the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, Israeli attacks in Gaza led to the collapse of the healthcare system, preventing access to medical care of the Palestinian population and leading to the deaths of doctors, nurses, healthcare personnel, and patients. This war will leave an indelible traces for future generations. As the representative of the WHO stated in this council, thousands of people will require rehabilitation and medical support for the rest of their lives. We want to reiterate, Mr. President, our unstinting support to the invaluable work on the ground carried out by the UN agency for relief work, UN Relief Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, mandated with a fundamental mission. We share the concern of the Secretary General and member states regarding the laws adopted in the Israeli parliament that target the coordinating role of UNRWA and that are a violation of international law, and the legally binding provisional measures ordered by the International Court of Justice. Mr. President, for Chile it is essential that there should be accountability for the actions that ended the lives of thousands of civilians during this war. There can be no impunity. In January of 2024, Chile and Mexico submitted to the International Criminal Court a written referral on the situation in Palestine, with the goal of strengthening the investigation on alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Israel. We consider it a priority to clear up these facts. Only this way will we avoid similar crimes in the future. We urge all states to fully cooperate with the court and take the necessary measures to implement its decisions, which is a legal imperative for all states parties of the Rome Statute. Along the same lines, we would like to reiterate what was mentioned in the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on the 19th of July of 2024 on the legal consequences derived from the policies and practices of Israel on occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. This opinion should be implemented as mentioned in Resolution 10/24 of the General Assembly of the 18th of September of 2024. Chile, in line with this resolution, hopes that all states and international organizations embrace and implement the conclusions of the court. Mr. President, all those present here are aware that the Palestinian question refers to a decades-long conflict, and we know that this cannot be reduced to events that were triggered by the attacks of the 7th of October of 2023. Of course, the agreement achieved does lay the groundwork that enables us to look forward to a more hopeful future, but to move in this direction, states have a duty to promote a stable and lasting solution based on international law. Chile will continue advocating for a two-state solution and promoting the right of Palestine and Israel to coexist in harmony within internationally recognized and secure borders, guaranteeing the human rights of all its inhabitants. We reiterate our appeal to ensure compliance with the resolutions that support the right of the Palestinian people to establish a sovereign state. I'm referring to resolutions 181 of 1947 and 242 of 1967 of the General Assembly, and resolutions of this Council, such as 2334, that confirm that Israeli settlements on occupied Palestinian territory, including in East Jerusalem, have no legal effect and are a violation of international law. Mr. President, is there any doubt that the ceasefire agreement achieved in recent days is a very good news for the hundreds of thousands of persons affected by the conflict? However, we must not lose sight that this is an absolute minimum, and we cannot be content with that. We welcome we would like to also condemn the attacks in the past few days by Israel in the Gaza Strip. The pressure of the international community must remain firm to move towards lasting peace. This will only be possible when the right of Palestine and Israel is guaranteed to coexist in harmony in line with the resolutions issued by the United Nations. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Chile for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Uganda.
Mr. President, I'm honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the 121 member states of the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM. I congratulate the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria upon its accession to the presidency of the Security Council this month, and express appreciation for granting NAM the opportunity to present its position on the question of Palestine. NAM reaffirms its long-standing common and principled position on the question of Palestine and is deeply concerned about the implications of the conflict and unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza on the Palestinian people, on the prospects for a just solution to its historic injustice, and for peace and security in the region. The intense conflict has worsened the humanitarian situation not only in Gaza, but also throughout the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. The members of the United Nations conferred on the Security Council the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security in accordance with Articles 12 and 24 of the Charter. The Security Council must uphold its mandate to maintain international peace and security and must act to implement its own resolutions. The question of Palestine cannot be the exception to the rule of international law and to the authority of this Council. Therefore, NAM calls on the Security Council to overcome its paralysis on the Palestinian question, to justly resolve this protracted conflict and tragic injustice in accordance with the international law and the many relevant resolutions that continue to be systematically violated by Israel, the occupying power, and that await implementation. The peaceful solution to the question of Palestine is central for establishing durable peace and stability in the Middle East, and is a matter of grave concern for the maintenance of international peace and security, and must be a priority for this Council. NAM condemns in the strongest terms all forms of violence, particularly Israel military attacks and Israelis' collective punishment against the Palestinian people as grave breaches of international law, including humanitarian and human rights law. The killing and injury of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, the majority of whom are children and women, and including humanitarian workers and journalists, is a testament to the Security Council's failure to carry out its mandate. NAM welcomes the ceasefire agreement reached, as well as the publicly stated commitment of the Palestinian side to this deal, and urges the Israeli side to follow suit, while hoping that this agreement be fully implemented so that it brings immediate relief to the Palestinian civilian population in Gaza and ease their suffering after enduring over 15 months of unbearable trauma, loss, and devastation. NAM demands an immediate and complete cessation of all forms of armed hostilities, humanitarian and socio-economic assistance to the Palestinian people, including the Palestinian refugees. The movement reaffirms the continued indispensability of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, along with other United Nations agencies and international organizations in the provision of urgently needed humanitarian assistance in line with international standards, and urges the international community to support the agency in all ways, including with sufficient and predictable funding. NAM is concerned by Israel's attempts to legislate against the continuity of UNRWA as a threat to its General Assembly mandate to provide humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian refugee pending the achievement of a just solution. To conclude, the movement seizes this opportunity to reiterate its call for collective international efforts to uphold international law to bring an end to this historic and grave injustice. NAM members reaffirm their commitment to promoting a just, lasting, comprehensive, and peaceful solution to the question of Palestine in all its aspects, including for the plight of Palestinian refugees, and reaffirm their support for the Palestinian people in their struggle to achieve justice and fulfill their inalienable rights and legitimate national aspirations, including to self-determination, freedom, and independence in their sovereign and independent state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Uganda for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Saudi Arabia. Please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، أود في البداية أن أهنئكم السيد الرئيس على رئاسة الجزائر لمجلس الأمن لهذا الشهر، راجيا لكم التوفيق والسداد لتيسير أعمال المجلس، ونثمن جهودكم المميزة خلال رئاستكم للمجلس، والشكر موصول كذلك إلى معالي الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة على إحاطته القيمة. السيد الرئيس، نجتمع اليوم ونحن في العام الثاني منذ اندلاع الحرب الإسرائيلية على قطاع غزة، وما زلنا نشهد آثارها الكارثية على الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق، بل واتساع نطاقها ليشمل جمهوريتي لبنان وسوريا الشقيقتين. وما كان لقوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي الإمعان في تلك الجرائم لولا غياب المساءلة وعجز المجلس عن الاطلاع بمسؤولياته. لقد حذرت بلادي من استمرار العدوان الإسرائيلي، وأن له عواقب على الأمن الإقليمي والدولي، وأنه يجب وضع حد للعدوان الإسرائيلي الذي يقف عائقا أمام تحقيق السلام. وفي هذا الصدد تجدد المملكة إدانتها ورفضها القاطع للإبادة الجماعية التي ترتكبها إسرائيل بحق الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق، كما تشجب المملكة منع وكالة غوث وتشغيل اللاجئين الفلسطينيين الأنروا من الأعمال الإغاثية في الأراضي الفلسطينية، وإعاقة عمل المنظمات الإنسانية عن تقديم المساعدات الإغاثية للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق. ونؤكد في هذا السياق أن استمرار إسرائيل في جرائمها بحق الإبرياء والإمعان في انتهاك قدسية المسجد الأقصى المبارك والانتقاص من الدور المحوري للسلطة الوطنية الفلسطينية على جميع الأراضي الفلسطينية، كل ذلك من شأنه تقويض جهود إحلال السلام في المنطقة. كما تعرب بلادي عن إدانتها واستنكارها للاعتداءات التي قامت بها حكومة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي عبر الاستيلاء على المنطقة العازلة في هضبة الجولان واستهداف قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلية الأراضي السورية. وهذا يؤكد استمرار إسرائيل في انتهاك قواعد القانون الدولي وتعمدها تعطيل فرص استعادة سوريا لأمنها واستقرارها ووحدة أراضيها. وتدعو بلادي في هذا الصدد المجتمع الدولي إلى إدانة الانتهاكات الإسرائيلية والتأكيد على احترام سيادة سوريا ووحدة أراضيها
efforts targeting Syrian soil. This constitutes a violation of the rules of international law, and this obstructs security, stability, and undermines territorial integrity of Syria. In this regard, my country urges the international community to condemn Israeli violations and to reaffirm respect for the sovereignty, territorial integrity of Syria, as well as the fact that Golan is occupied Syrian territory. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, in the light of the gravity of the situation, which has been the case since the outbreak of the crisis, my country has adopted significant measures through collective international action to condemn the Israeli aggression, a vicious aggression, reaffirming the central nature of the Palestinian cause and demanding an end for the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory. My country has presided over the ministerial committee tasked with a joint Islamic summit held in Riyadh in November 2023, carrying out visits to certain countries with the aim of calling upon the international community to shoulder its responsibility to end the Israeli aggression and to protect civilians. Our joint efforts have resulted in peace-loving nations recognizing the state of Palestine and the adoption of a General Assembly resolution which considers that Palestine is eligible, has a full-fledged eligibility to be a full member of the United Nations. We have also launched an international coalition to implement the two-state solution in partnership with the European Union and the Kingdom of Norway. We are eagerly awaiting the convening of an international high-level conference on the implementation of the two-state solution to be held in June and to be co-chaired by France and the Kingdom. And we called upon member states to participate at the highest level in this conference. Mr. President, we applaud the ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip and appreciate the efforts undertaken by the state of Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. We stress the need to comply with the agreement to end the Israeli aggression against Gaza, to withdraw the occupying Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip and the rest of the Palestinian and Arab territory, and for the return of displaced persons to be carried out, for people to return to their homes. There's a need to base ourselves on this agreement to resolve the conflict and to facilitate the return of the Palestinian people and to ensure that they can enjoy their rights, and first and foremost, the establishment of the independent state within 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. We call for an immediate delivery of assistance and the implementation of quick recovery projects in the light of the catastrophic humanitarian situation. This constitutes an obligation for Israel pursuant to the provisions of the Fourth Geneva Convention and the customary provisions of international law, which are reflected in the additional protocol to the Geneva Convention dating 1977. We emphasize the central and indispensable role of UNRWA when it comes to the delivery of humanitarian assistance and life-saving assistance to the people of the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian people throughout the war. We extend our gratitude for the sacrifices that UNRWA has made, and we stress the centrality of its role in the stabilization and delivery of services, including the establishment of a Palestinian state. We also condemn in the strongest terms the attack by Israeli occupying forces against the city of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. Our kingdom recalls our call for the international community to shoulder its responsibility to end violations by Israel of relevant international laws and treaties, which have resulted in ongoing chaos in the occupied lands and threatens security of innocent, safety of innocent civilians, and compromises peace. To conclude, we hope that this agreement will definitively end Israel's brutal war, which has killed approximately 47,000 martyrs. More than 110,000 people have been injured as a result. Thank you for your attention, Mr. President.
The representative of Saudi Arabia for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. أود بداية أن أرحب بترأس
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish at the outset to voice satisfaction vis-à-vis Mr. Ahmed Attah, Minister for Foreign Affairs, and the diaspora of Algeria for the stewardship of this meeting, and I commend Algeria on its presidency of the Council and wish them every success. We thank Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, for his very significant briefing. The developments that the Middle East has been experiencing requires that the international community consolidate its efforts to establish a fair and lasting peace in the region, to ensure that dialogue, understanding, and peaceful solutions reign in order to end the conflict and in order to provide assistance to the affected people. Our kingdom stresses the importance of the ceasefire in Gaza, as well as the exchange of hostages and detainees, as well as access of humanitarian assistance and the return of displaced persons to their homes. And the ceasefire is an important step forward to help mitigate the tragic humanitarian crisis and to end this devastating war, which has lasted for more than 15 months. The Kingdom of Bahrain recalls the importance of respect by all parties, compliance by all parties with the ceasefire immediately without any obstructions, and the importance of withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and the importance of assistance being provided to civilians to meet urgent needs related to food and medical assistance. This needs to be done in an unhindered way in accordance with international law. We applaud the role of diplomacy and mediation, which has been undertaken by Egypt, Qatar, the United States of America, and these are efforts geared towards the achievement of that agreement. Mr. President, the 33rd Arab Summit was hosted in Bahrain last year. This reflected the collective will to ensure positive change for people in the region, and the Kingdom of Bahrain launched initiatives to contribute to finding solutions to significant issues plaguing the region, specifically with the recognition of the State of Palestine. And we stress the importance of stability, sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Syria and for Lebanon, as well as the implementation of Resolution 1701. We reiterate our commitment to the principles of dialogue, cohabitation, and mutual respect, as well as cooperation, in order to arrive at a lasting solution to the crisis and in order to address all of the issues affecting the Middle East in order to achieve peace and stability for the people in the region.
I now give the floor to the representative of Timor-Leste.
Mr. President, thank you for giving me the floor. I congratulate Algeria for the presidency of the Security Council for the month of January. Mr. President, the recent ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, which includes the release of hostages and the commitment to various terms, signifies a pivotal and optimistic shift in the enduring conflict that has affected the Gaza Strip for the past 15 years. Timor-Leste applauds this accord and recognizes the relentless efforts of mediators and a shared hope for peace in the region. Mr. President, the ceasefire mediated by Egypt and Qatar with the support of US is a significant advancement in ending the violence in Gaza. The agreement consists of 3 phases, with the first phase anticipated to last 6 weeks. This preliminary phase is essential for establishing stability and preparing for subsequent negotiations and peace initiatives. A critical component of the agreement is the hostage exchange. This exchange serves not only as a humanitarian act, but also as a vital confidence-building measure that can foster comprehensive peace discussions. This accord allows for an increase in humanitarian aid to Gaza, which has suffered extensive devastation due to the conflict. This aid is expected to address urgent civilian needs, including food, medical supplies, and essential services, playing a crucial role in stabilizing the region and laying the groundwork for long-term reconstruction.
Despite the development on the grounds in the recent days, we remain hopeful that peace will endure. All parties must remain committed to preventing a resurgence of violence. This will set the stage for the agreement's third phase, emphasizing the return of remains of deceased individuals and initiating the reconstruction of Gaza. This effort, hopefully, will be overseen by Egypt, Qatar, and the United Nations to assure transparency, coordination, and effectiveness. Mr. President, although the ceasefire agreement signifies progress, we recognize resistance from hardliners within Israel, who perceive the deal as a concession to Hamas. However, families of victims express relief and hope for the complete release of hostages. The approval from the Israeli Security Cabinet is a constructive step, though full cabinet endorsement is essential for execution. We hope that Hamas will take this opportunity to cooperate and present itself as a promoter of nonviolence by working together with interested parties in fostering peace and bringing a long-lasting solution to the conflict. Mr. President, rebuilding Gaza encompasses more than just infrastructural repair. It is crucial for restoring hope and normalcy for its inhabitants. This endeavor will necessitate patience and openness to continue fostering dialogue and reconciliation. We must not allow the cycle of violence to resume, and this commitment is essential. Coming from a region where dialogue and reconciliation are viewed as pathways to resolve conflicts, I can affirm, along with others, the importance of these principles. Mr. President, therefore, to ensure the effectiveness of sustainability of this ceasefire agreement, several vital measures shall be undertaken. First, the violent conflict must be decisively halted, with the Palestinian Authority asserting control in Gaza, uniting all Palestinian factions toward peace and the realization of United Nations resolutions concerning a two-state solution. Second, Timor-Leste encourages ongoing dialogue between the parties, focusing on building trust, addressing grievances, and fostering mutual respect for the sake of the Palestinian people and their future. Third, the international community must persist in supporting the peace process and providing essential resources, expertise, and diplomatic backing to ensure the agreement's success, holding all parties accountable for their commitments and facilitating continuous negotiations. And fourth, beyond immediate humanitarian aid and reconstruction, efforts must concentrate on sustainable development in Gaza, including investments in education, healthcare, and economic opportunities that can empower the population and diminish the potential for future conflicts. This agreement symbolizes hope, but also highlights the region's complex and fragile peace. The conflict, which has caused the deaths of tens of thousands of civilians, particularly children, along with the extensive destruction, necessitates more than temporary accords. It calls for ongoing diplomatic efforts and sincere commitment from both parties and the international community to achieve a lasting solution in the form of a two-state solution. Timor-Leste stands with the international community in endorsing this accord and its implementation. We urge both sides to focus on reconciliation and unity, facilitating reconstruction and sustainable peace. Together, we can strive towards a future where peace and prosperity are achievable for all. It is critical that both parties maintain their commitment to dialogue, ensuring a peaceful and stable future for the Palestinian people. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Timor-Leste for his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.